Someone again. Hello everyone, it's George from Ireland. Here I am in William Morris's house in Walthamstow, Essex. So it was called Waterhouse originally because there was a big pond in the garden behind. See one of these medieval drawings? So from his earliest boyhood, he was mad keen on the Middle Ages, and he used to wear a suit of armour, mount his Shetland pony, gird on his sabre and ride around doing deeds of daring do, okay? Because every chance called forth a noble knight. So he's living out his fantasies of Arthurian chivalry. Here you can see some of the things that he used, you know, a photograph of him aged 23. Remember, photos were a very new thing. They were only invented in the 1840s. That's before he was born in 1834. So his father was a wealthy broker, owned some mines in Devonshire, and one of the mines was even named after William Morris's mother. So when William Morris was 13, his father died. His father began going by stagecoach into the city of London each day. That was the financial district of London, but it was a journey of about 2 hours, as in not in his own horse-drawn carriage, but if you're a wealthy person, you could share it with, say, perhaps 5 other men. And that was that. So one of the most notable moments of his childhood was the Great Exhibition. Well, by this time he would have been 18. 1851. There it was in Hyde Park, this huge, long glass building. It's Prince Albert's bright idea, the great exhibition of the works of industry of all nations. So showcasing what the United States could make, France and so on, the Zollverein, as in the German Customs Union, the United Kingdom, other countries, their manufactures. And so millions of people came to see it, and I mean millions. Bearing in mind the population of the UK was only about 20 million at the time, so it was a great hit. A lot of money was paid. It was in Hyde Park. It doesn't exist anymore. They dismantled it, moved by piece to Sydenham, South London, where unfortunately it was destroyed by an accidental fire in 1936. But although William Morris went to see it, he very much reacted against it. The money raised from the Great Exhibition was used to buy the land in South Kensington, London, set up what people sometimes called Albertopolis, as in after Prince Albert, Royal Albert Hall, the Royal School of Mines, the Royal College of Music, Imperial College London, the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum. But anyway, he didn't like manufacturing, William Morris, said things should be made by hand, should be individual. He looked back to the splendour of medieval art. Look at that handiwork, the detail. It's also individual. Okay, they don't make it like that anymore. And he made many sketches of these of medieval scenes and of carvings of relief statues in medieval cathedrals. So he felt he was born a couple of centuries too late. And there he was looking back. You can see so many of his paintings and drawings around here to the Middle Ages, which he felt was a much more soulful era. He hated the noise and the grime and the facelessness, the anonymity of industrial production. He felt that beauty was a natural right. Everybody had the right to look at beautiful things. He disliked the way the country was being gobbled up by the rapacious expansion of cities and the growth of the railways. That didn't stop him travelling by train, and it didn't stop him working for wealthy industrialists. So he went to Exeter College, Oxford, and his first term he met Edward Burne-Jones, who was to be his lifelong friend, and they started painting and drawing together, composing poesy. Also, William Morris wrote some poems for the socialist movement about the dawning of a brighter day. People would no longer be exploited, would no longer be paid starvation wages. So he hired a young woman called Jane Burden as his model, and she was his artistic muse, but he fell head over heels in love with her. She's thought to have actually been closer to Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and he proposed marriage to her. Now, his family were already aghast because William Morris had decided not to be ordained in the Church of England, and that was the career they had planned for him. Because he had money and some social connections, it wouldn't have been difficult for him to get a good living. By a living, I mean a parish with a handsome salary, because the salary for Anglican clergy varied enormously according to which parish you were allotted to. He turned all that down, decided he was going to be an artist, which was a very precarious existence. Now, fortunately, he had quite a lot of family money. So he married Jane Burden. She came from a working-class family in Oxford. Even these days, there's a gap between the rich and the poor. But in those days, the gulf between the different social classes was enormous. But she felt that this was too good an opportunity to refuse, so she married him, despite people suspecting that she didn't actually love him. It's believed she had an extramarital affair with Dante Gabriel Rossetti. So he had 2 daughters with her. Anyway, they lived in the Red House when they first married in London. You can see there, it still stands in southeast London, the Red House. Anyway, this house we're in now, this 3-bedroom Georgian house, it was actually a step down in the world for Dante Gabriel Rossetti. He'd originally lived somewhere even bigger, but when his father died, they moved here. What else should I point out? So they had several servants as well, a huge park behind, which you don't really have time to look at. He liked making stained glass, as in this musician here. And he was a great admirer of medieval cathedrals. He thought that the 19th century produced nothing that good. You can see a bit of the interior of when they exhibited the work of his company. He set up a company called Morris & Co., which was then often called just the firm, had offices on Oxford Street in London, later George Street by Hanover Square, London. So even though he disliked industrialists, that didn't stop him accepting commissions from them, and things would be bespoke. They'd tell them exactly what they wanted dimensions. He'd visit their house and see that it would be vernacular furniture in keeping with the surroundings. So everything would be individually made to their specifications. He would advise them on what he thought would be apposite. Anyway, the one thing is obviously it was very pricey. So only the super wealthy could afford to buy his designs. I should say that the school he went to was Marlborough College, which is about 100 miles west of London. The only other famous person to have attended Marlborough is Kate Middleton. So what else can I say? So some of these medieval style images he painted when this was completely out of fashion, and he was really swimming against the tide, going back to the old days. But there was a bit of a cult of medievalism starting in the mid-19th century, partly because of him, looking back to King Arthur. And William Morris claimed that as a child, by the age of 7, he had read every single novel by Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter Scott, who died in 1830, just before William Morris was born. You know, Sir Walter Scott, really, who epitomises being a romantic right-winger. That Scottish baronet, novelist and poet. Lochinvar is one of his most famous poems. Anyway, you can see the huge Walter Scott monument in Edinburgh, the heart of Midlothian, monument for the series of novels that Sir Walter Scott wrote. But anyway, so both of them had this very rosy view of the Middle Ages, pretending it was much more pleasant than it really was for the average person, that the nobility really lived up to the word noble. Well, for many of them, they were really the very inversion of the word noble. They were as ignoble as you can possibly imagine. You know our idea of chivalry as being honourable, being merciful, showing great fortitude. Well, some of them were not gallant at all, and would certainly harm women and children and take hostages and would exploit the needy, were as irreligious and as treacherous as you can imagine, perjuring themselves and being absolutely brutal. So, okay, a few of them perhaps lived up to that chivalric ideal, but many of them were about as far from that as can possibly be imagined. So I think William Morris was very much deluding himself if he thought the Middle Ages were better for the average person. So William Morris felt that there was too much clutter in the world, particularly the Victorian era. He wanted to go back to a simpler and more unostentatious style of design, and you can see this in some of the plain furniture which he made. It should be comfortable and not to jam-pack your house with too much. Really was the sort of the father of minimalism, if you will. You can see some William Morris drawing rooms up there. You can see the bed, indeed, in which he was born, which still exists. So later they moved to Kelmscott Manor in Oxfordshire, the very western edge of that county, very close to the border with Gloucestershire. Still open to the public twice a week, but look it up, because it's got limited opening hours. You need a car to get there. That's Kelmscott Manor. There's the Kelmscott Press, a publishing house, which is really trying to continue his work. Obviously, they do publish the oeuvre of William Morris, but people who write in a similar genre, blazoning forth the socialist cause. So he wanted to do more for working class people, and his sympathy for the proletariat was increased by his marriage to Jane Burden. So he was a man really with no social pretensions who had a bit of sympathy for the underdog. But he still hobnobbed with aristocrats like the Earl of Carlisle, as in Carlisle is a town on the very northwest corner of England on the border with North Britain. So you can see some of the wallpaper he designed, and you notice that the motifs are usually plant motifs. And this is the sort of stuff you see on the in the Oxford Union upstairs, the Morris Room, as in William Morris. So they had various famous friends like Philip Webb, a very well-known architect, Ford Madox Brown, and John Henry Deal. John Ruskin, who was a generation older than William Morris, was another dear friend. So John Ruskin was also an artist, also a socialist. There's Ruskin College, Oxford as well. Ruskin College is not part of Oxford University. It's in the city of Oxford, but people often call it Ruskin College, Oxford, which is misleading. So Ruskin College is really meant for trades unionists. You have to be at least 25 to begin there. So the idea was to give working class people a chance at tertiary education when it's founded in the late 19th century, because until that time, for working class people, there was almost no chance of going on to third level education. I don't think an award degrees actually, Ruskin College. So there we are. Anyway, so you see so many of his neo-medieval works. He had friends in the United States, and his company, the firm, they also exhibited their works at trade fairs in Philadelphia, Boston, other parts of the United States. His work was sold in New York, so his work was particularly felt in the United States, which was undergoing the same experiences as the United Kingdom of industrialization, and some people reacting against that. So some clergy became attracted to his work, so he got some commissions from churches and so on. Remember, this is the time of the Oxford movement, of some people in the Church of England going back to medievalism in a sense, rediscovering the Catholic roots of Anglicanism, saying that it will be Anglo-Catholic, not Roman Catholic. They'll remain in the Church of England. Queen Victoria will be the head of their church, but they can still have monks and nuns, and they can still call their priests father and believe in sacraments and venerate the Blessed Virgin and invoke the saints and so forth, and go back to some of the medieval architecture and interior design for the church. So that was that. He was always a bibliomane, phenomenally well read. Indeed, when he died, his physician said, well, he's died at the age of 62 only because he's done the work of 10 men. So an exceptionally imaginative, productive man who was just really brimming over with effervescence and energy, just a fireball of creativity. And you can see his handwriting. So if you're a graphologist, what can this tell you? The leaning forward, an extrovert character. Well, you can't see who writes his name. If you write sometimes if you have an unusually large letter, for the initial letter of your Christian name or even your surname, suggests that you're very much a domineering character. What I was talking about the Oxford Union, we could have a look at it here. This is what I was talking about. This is all William Morris. Look at the leaf motifs here up on the roof, and look at this, the Morte d'Arthur scenes here, difficult to make out, the midnight blue of the sky and some sort of wizard's wand, looking up in contemplation, the skull, the shield with the cross on it of these knights. Look at King Arthur embracing this lady, the stag, and so forth. And this is now the library of the Oxford Union. It was originally the debating chamber of the Oxford Union. The Oxford Union being founded in 1823 as the Debating Society of Oxford University, not in its current location, and it moved to its current premises in about 1850. But it outgrew that debating chamber, and the old debating chamber is now the library. There's a new debating chamber right beside it. So William Morris felt that too much 19th century art was vacuous. He began the campaign to save medieval buildings, and not just cathedrals and so on, but humble houses which he felt were quaint and connect people to their past. It was a crucial part of their heritage, and that was very underappreciated at the time. People didn't value the Middle Ages because they wasn't quite so far ago. So he began this campaign to list buildings, to preserve buildings, so they wouldn't be demolished, because so many glorious architectural gems were destroyed in the 19th century during this relentless drive to industrialize for more consumption and production. So that was him. He studied architecture informally, he took courses on oil paintings and so forth, and he composed endless poesy. So he was a multi-talented man, gifted in just so many spheres, and that's why really his name, which re-echoes down the centuries to this very day. That is just a little bit about William Morris.